need a 23, that's a bottom. Probably need two 24s and two 25s. Well, these are supposed to be dadoed into there, 1/4 of an inch on either side. So it would make sense that this would be a 1/2 an inch too big. Oh wait, it should be 1/2 an inch too small. Otherwise, that's a big drawer. Today is another exciting and scary day. It's when we get to find out whether all the work that we did the other day cutting this drawer material was worth it. If this is the first video that you're watching, jump back. We've been working on this small cabinet project for a few days now. We spent a couple of days setting up our shopsmith and making sure that we had all the pieces, parts, and that everything was cutting accurately. Then we spent some time cutting the sheets for the boxes, which we got all that stuff cut. And then we spent a day working on the pocket hole joinery and got the lower boxes assembled. We can't assemble the upper boxes yet because we didn't have the back material that we needed to complete this. So we got the backs and the drawer stock all cut, and so that's kind of where we're at. The software that we used to set the sheet layout made our life easier and simultaneously insanely difficult. So difficult, we basically look like a high school teacher making notes in red. That one's pretty good. This one is even worse. This is the drawer stock. This got to be one heck of a puzzle. And so I'm not gonna be shocked if we have problems like this today where stuff doesn't fit. So my goal today is to get everything that needs to be dadoed completed. That includes the drawers and some of the backs on the upper cabinets because there will be a backing material there so that it looks finished on the inside. The lower cabinets, we're not putting backs in. They're either a drawer base cabinet or a sink cabinet, so neither one of those needs a back on it. So I want to start out by just kind of laying out some of the drawers and kind of looking at them and trying to figure out if all the cutting that we did the other day will work, and if not, start making notes and hopefully we can fix it and start correcting things. So this looks pretty correct except for these look way too long. They're a 25, and on my worksheet here, a 25 is the front and back, which we have correct. It's 8 3/4 by 19 7/8. 8 3/4 on the button, and that's 21. Oh, I totally know what happened. So these didn't get cut down. I remember now. Here's 25 right here, and you can see that there's actually a cut here that needed to be made. What happened was we ripped 21 all the way down through here and all the way down through here to make life easy because these are 21s and these are 21s, but we didn't trim those for length. So the good news is that's a pretty easy fix. So we need to find all the 25s and just make sure they're the right dimension. I can see that we made another mistake. There are only two 25s on our worksheet, which is here, and we had 2 of those in the quantity column. So I don't know how I overlooked that. I'm pretty sure I went back and fixed that. So maybe I'm using an old, oh, that's the answer. So somehow I grabbed the wrong cut sheet. That's the problem with having more than one of these laying around. I had written version 4.0 on here, and I don't know, I just grabbed one that was an older version, and that's why we didn't cut that piece. So I need to look at these and figure out what else we didn't cut. Well, crud, it looks like in my infinite wisdom, I destroyed version 4.0 because I knew that having more than one of those circulating around the wood shop would cause this exact problem. And it looks like I destroyed the wrong one. So I think we're just gonna have to figure this out as we go. I'll probably just start working through putting the drawers together. I could go find another worksheet and try to reprint it, but that to me is just gonna create more confusion. So let's just work through one drawer at a time, and I think what's missing will become super obvious. I'm hoping this is the only one. I can't remember, it's been a couple of days. So then this bottom actually gets held up 1/2 an inch with the dado, so we should see 1/2 an inch right there, and that's for the recess on the bottom for the drawer slides. So the drawer slides that we're using, we can't bring those bottoms all the way down to the front and then dado all the way around, which would be super ideal because the slide needs a 1/2 inch recess on the bottom for the hardware to work because we're using bottom mount slides. So that drawer looks pretty good. If we just add the dados on this piece and on this piece, that'll hold the bottom in there, and then we can screw and glue the front and back and sides. So let's make sure we have all the stuff for 2 of these drawers. So I think we're gonna need to cut 2 more 25s. So there's another 23. So that's the bottom. And there's a 24 and a 24. So there's the sides. So we need 2 more 25s. I think today's gonna be a rough day. I don't know. I already screwed it up. So this one is a 25, right? And look at the grain, guys. The grain is going this direction, right? It's pretty obvious. I had the grain oriented on this board correctly. I had this set up to cut these going this direction. And then I triple checked it in my brain, and then I grabbed the board and I cut it wrong. So now you can see that this grain is going this direction and this grain is going this direction. Unfortunately, just laying around in the boneyard here, everything I have is basically the wrong grain except for this board here, and it's a pretty big board, so I'm tempted to just not use that for what I just screwed up, and nothing else in here will fit. So I'm not proud of this. In fact, quite frankly, I worked extremely hard to make sure that the grains were going the right directions. So what I'm gonna do for now is we're gonna rip these into 25s. And I think, hate to say it, like it's happening to me already, but we're probably gonna use these for the front because this is gonna be covered by the actual drawer front. So you really won't see it, but the back of the drawer you will see. Don't hold me to this right now, guys, but the objective is to not screw this up and not make a horribly hideous set of cabinets. So if I get further along and I can remember and we don't need that piece of scrap right there, I may rip new 25s that match the grain. But I want to get through all the drawers first and find out what other stuff I screwed up before I start jockeying with all my scrap material. So let's go for these small drawers that are going to go on this base cabinet. They're 27, 28, and 29. You guys can kind of see why the grain orientation is just a matter of pride more than anything. So all these sides, the grain is running the length, and then the drawer, the grain is running backwards and forwards, not cross-grained or anything. Since this is my first set of cabinets, I'm gonna give myself a little leeway, but doesn't excuse making shoddy cabinets. Of course, quality isn't just a matter of whether it fits together or not. I think quality is more of a subjective feeling with this type of stuff. Does it look nice as well as function? Pretty good. And good. Cool, so that'll be the 2 upper drawers on our 24-inch base cabinet. And would you look at that, I got the grain right on all these pieces. Ha, hot dog. Last but not least, we have our drawer base, so we're looking for 64, 65, and 66. Oh wait, oh there's 2 different drawer sizes here. So let's do those, and then we'll do the big drawer, or the small drawer. That looks pretty close to a 1/2 inch. We have all of our drawer stock. Wait, we forgot one. 68, 69, and 70. There's 69s. There's a 68. 69. Something tells me those are the fronts, but they're not a 16. Ha! So those are 70s, not 16s. And it looks like everything fits. So these drawers are deeper, and then we've got 1, 2, 3 deeper drawers, and then a shallow drawer. and that's on our lower cabinets. So there's the cabinets thrown in, and that's the goal, is to get those done and jointed. Of course, we're not going to glue them and screw them today because we've got to do some sanding and some finishing, but if we can just get the dados done, that's going to be a good day. And then we've got to do the dados for these upper backs, and these are going to go on the upper cabinets, and they're going to provide this kind of finished look. So they're actually slightly recessed in here, about a 1/2 inch. And that's so that we can fit a 1/2 inch mounting block behind it that will hold, kind of acts as a cleat to hold the cabinet to the wall. Lots of dadoing to do today. If you haven't watched the last video, give it a quick watch. We talk a little bit about this dado blade and how to set up a dado blade. It's not a tutorial, but kind of just sharing what's happening here. So we set this up for a 1/2 inch dado. We followed the instructions on the box, which basically involved using these two outer blades. There's a blade here and a blade here, and then inside of that there's actually two separate chipper blades, and when those are all combined, we're supposed to get a 1/2 inch dado joint. Obviously we're going to find out in just a second what a dado joint is, but I'm assuming that you're watching this video, you haven't seen the last one, and you don't know what a dado joint is. It looks something like this. We're basically going to remove the wood that's inside this little bracket. And what it's going to do is create a pocket for the drawer material to slide into, like this. And that's actually going to help to support the bottom of the drawer. We are going to use some glue, but we're going to screw and glue the front and the back, which are going to provide a lot of structure to the box. So this little joint will be supporting the weight of whatever's on the bottom of the drawer. Another benefit to the dado joint as it pertains to the upper cabinets is it gets rid of any exposed end grain. So normally in the cabinet you'd have maybe something like this visible, right? And if you don't get those cuts absolutely perfect, well, you just see a little bit of a dark line there. But when we do a dado joint, it's going to conceal the end of that panel, making it look more like it's one piece of wood, and we'll end up with a joint more like that on the inside of the upper cabinets. If we didn't want to put the mounting blocks on the back for some reason, we could do a different type of joint, which is called a rabbet joint. And that's basically a dado without the third side. I won't get into detail on that stuff. We're not going to do a rabbet joint. If you haven't jumped back and watched the Shopsmith tuning video, this is really where that work is starting to pay off. We're looking for extremely tight joints on all this stuff. And of course, it's both aesthetically pleasing as well as stronger. And it just makes me really happy when I put a couple pieces of wood and they fit really tightly without any fine tuning on a sander or a joiner or anything like that. Of course, that's a pretty frazzled looking piece of plywood, but you get the idea. Part of the reason that I wanted to wait until we had everything cut to install this dado blade is calibrating your dado blade takes quite a bit of effort. I mentioned in the other video that one of the benefits to the Shopsmith is that the arbor is physically removable and interchangeable. So we can leave this dado blade, once it's calibrated, on this arbor at 1/2 inch, which is great. But the problem is, once we get the setup on the dado blade dialed in, we really, really don't want to change it. I guess if I could say, it's not as important, although it's all important, but it's less important that the dado be at the perfect depth, more so that it be at a consistent depth. Because what we don't want is the drawer bottom to tilt in any direction. So as long as we cut all of our dados at the same time and they're all calibrated to the same everything should fit pretty good. I mean, obviously we're going to have issues with the height up here if our dado is not the correct depth, but the point is that you really want to set your dado blade one time and then do everything in your setup. That way it's at least consistent, even if it's off by just a tiny little bit. I'd like to think it's because of good design, but it just worked out this way, that the dado blade we're going to be doing on the inside of the upper cabinets happens to be at the exact same depth as our drawer stock. So in theory, we should be able to set this dado blade up one time. It's the same distance from the edge, and it's the same depth. One adjustment, all the dados. Really close. Yep, Looks really good to me. So the next question is, does our stock fit in here? It's not super tight. There's a little bit of wobble in it, which really sucks because to get that to fit tight, we'd have to do some serious surgery to the dado blade. I don't know if it's worth it or not. So there's a full dado joint. I went a little fast on the end there, so I ended up tearing that out. I should have slowed down. So, well, see, that piece fits nice and tight. So that might have just been me wiggling the piece. I guess there could be a slight variance in thickness. Oh yeah, so these two pieces aren't even the same thickness, which kind of just tells me that if we spend a bunch of time trying to make that dado joint super tight, we're gonna just make more work for ourselves. One of the things that Freud is really proud of with their dado blades is that you get a very flat bottom on their dado, and that's because of how the blades and the chippers and everything work. If you were to use a regular table saw or a skill saw, you'd actually have a very rough bottom in here that would need to be cleaned out. And it's just a tremendous amount of work to get a beautiful dado joint like that. I think it's deceptively simple how we just did that. And I think Freud has put a lot of work into theirs. I'm sure other companies have too, but these guys know their saw blades and they're really proud of them. And then also, it's really hard to see, but right here in the corners, there's actually just a little bit of an ear, and that's to help the glue. When we glue these up, it gives a place for the glue to kind of chase to. Otherwise, it ends up squirting out the ends, and there's just not enough space in there except for a very, very thin layer of glue. That joint looks beautiful, and now, so we've got the width set to 1/2 inch. We've got the depth set to 1/4 inch. We may want to do up one drawer and just test fit it and see. It looks like it might just be a hair underneath. I think if I was a really high-end cabinet maker, I probably would have some sort of system for choosing which side of these pieces is the most beautiful. Like this is kind of a lighter color side, and this is kind of a darker color side. So I feel like those two colors really complement each other well, where this gives a lot of contrast. So I guess in the interest of making the drawer look kind of more uniform, I feel like that kind of looks better. So this side's kind of similar. Well, there's not really a good or a bad side. Oh, look at that. So there is a bad side, so I don't know when we did that. Might have just been on the plywood and I didn't see it. Let's go with this orientation. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna tell ourselves that the side that the tape is on gets the dado. That's a good looking drawer, at least for me. That turned out better than I expected, guys. I just have such bad experiences with table saws and with dado joining and stuff like that. It's nice to be using a precise saw that's calibrated and a very good quality dado blade, and I feel like this speaks for itself. This is a little less Jesse and a lot more the equipment, but also being patient and taking the time to do it right. And this drawer is basically ready for sanding first, and then we need to lacquer it. Once it's lacquered, we're ready to screw it and glue it. It sounds like there's probably a good use for sealing the edges of the plywood right here. So even if we're gonna sand and lacquer the faces, might wanna hit these with a little bit of sandpaper and put some sort of sealant or lacquer or something on them. Obviously, they're as vulnerable as any part of the wood, maybe more vulnerable. So I guess I haven't decided whether we're gonna finish the entire drawer. I don't know if the outsides really need to be finished. The inside, no question. We need to be able to clean these, you know, with a wet rag or a vacuum or something. So we're gonna have to do something to those. I believe our saw is set up, and there's no reason that we can't just start working through one drawer at a time. Let's start doing our dados. We'll kind of lay the drawer out, pick and choose where we want them to go, do the work, put it together like we did on this one, make sure that everything fits nice and good. And then, man, it seems like we need a way to kind of mark those for putting them back together. Oh, call me crazy, but I feel like we should test fitment of these. Ooh, cool. Fun. Oh yeah, and they're soft close. You betcha. Okay, I'm kind of proud of that. That's pretty stinking good. Like I said earlier, a lot of that's the table saw, but it is very accurate. So it probably goes without saying, but for those who aren't familiar with joinery, if we cut this dado too deep, what you would see here is a gap right there because that joint's too deep and the material can't span that. If we cut it too shallow, what you would see is a gap here, because this would be pushing these sides out and this would not be able to reach the sides. When we have this tight of a joint and this tight of a joint, that means we have nailed the dado depth. And of course the width of this dado, the material is varying probably a 64th, so we could fuss with it even more, but we're not going to. But that to me is a textbook tight dado joint. Is this tight enough to do finished furniture work? No. But for cabinetry, I think we're there. I think I'm gonna put my head down and just work through each drawer one at a time, test fit. If they're good, move on to the next one, and we'll try to get through all these dados, at least on the drawers, and get all the drawers set up, and then we can start working on the next part of this project. That's it. That's all the drawers that go in this set of cabinets. It's kind of weird because it felt like a ton of drawers with all the cutting that I did yesterday. Can you believe like that's all the cutting that I did yesterday? I mean, there's a whole bunch of little pieces that are the backs, so I guess there's that, but it seems like that shouldn't take all day. But again, we're videoing our life, so if you think it should take less, video your life and then judge. Anyway, it feels good. We're all done with laying out the drawers. They're all basically ready for sanding. All the joinery went just as good as it did early on. Everything looks super tight and fits nice. So feels great. I can't tell you. This is the satisfaction that I was talking about in the earlier video when I was working on calibrating the Shopsmith and spending an entire day going through every little detail. This is the satisfaction that you get from doing that. I think it just makes tasks like this more enjoyable, but I think it also makes them easier. When things just work the way they're supposed to, it's amazing. I think when you put this in a software, it's easy to make perfect squares in a software, but try making them in real life. It's not as easy as it looks. So let's do a little bit of work on some of the upper cabinet pieces, and this is going to take some real focus because we have to put that dado in the right place on the right pieces. So everything fits good. These cabinets are looking nice and tidy. We got the backs all cut and everything is fitting together good. Of course, this is probably a little confusing. This 1/2 inch reveal, if this were level like that, is actually gonna go on the bottom of the cabinet, but the way I've set it on the bench here, you know, it's gonna look like it's on the top. We did that again for lighting, and so that we have kind of a little recessed space behind the face frame so that we can have something up underneath of there. If we made them flush on the bottom, then your lighting would protrude down and it would just look bad. So this dadoing today went better than expected for sure. I'm always super intimidated by dadoing probably because in my past, I've often done it with a table saw. You can do it with a table saw, but it's just dirtier. Of course, we were using a very out of calibration table saw and a table saw blade and all this stuff. So today, the Shopsmith, the dado blade, patience, calibration, it all came together beautifully. This tower of drawers makes me super proud. I'm super excited to get to sanding them and finishing them and then getting them all put together, but I think probably the part that I'm most excited about is putting them in the cabinet boxes and that first good drawer slide. Whew, what a day. We got it all done. This is what I was hoping to get done today. Just got back from the hardware store and we've got sanding paper and some lacquers to start in on finishing. I think that's the next step in my mind. We've got to get these backs finished. So these are unfinished and we want to bolt these cabinets together, right? But we can't do that until these backs are finished. So we need to start with finishing, sanding and finishing. Then we can start screwing and gluing, or screwing the cabinets together. And then the drawers, we're actually going to glue those. So we're going to screw and glue. That's at least a whole day between sanding and finishing. I would be shocked if we can get all that done in one day. Guess you're gonna have to stick around and find out.